What would you do if an orphan child handed you a note in court, begging for help? For Judge Elizabeth Carter, that moment changed everything. But what she discovered next will leave you speechless. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more incredible tales. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We'd love to hear from you. The courtroom buzzed with the low hum of murmurs, the sound of papers rustling, and attorneys shuffling between their tables. Judge Elizabeth Carter sat at the bench, her sharp gaze moving between the two lawyers arguing over the custody of a young girl. It was supposed to be a routine hearing, but something about the child sitting quietly at the edge of the room drew Elizabeth's attention. The girl, no older than 11, had dark, expressive eyes that seemed too burdened for someone her age. Her small hands clutched a crumpled piece of paper as if it were a lifeline. She wore a simple dress, its hem slightly frayed, and her tightly braided hair framed her solemn face. She wasn't fidgeting like most children would in such a situation. Instead, she sat perfectly still, her gaze fixed on the floor. Elizabeth's heart ached. She had seen too many children like this, lost in the cracks of the system, voiceless in a world that moved on without them. But something about this girl, Maya, pulled at her in a way she couldn't explain. "Your Honor," the girl's attorney began, interrupting Elizabeth's thoughts, "it's clear that the Bennetts have provided a stable environment for Maya. Returning her to their care is in her best interest." The opposing lawyer interjected, their tone sharp. "Stable? The Bennetts have been reported for neglect multiple times. Maya deserves better." The arguments blurred into white noise as Elizabeth's focus returned to the girl. She noticed how Maya's fingers trembled as she clutched the paper tighter. Then, to everyone's surprise, the girl slowly rose from her chair. "Your Honor." Maya's voice was soft, barely audible above the courtroom's din. Elizabeth raised a hand, silencing the attorneys. "Yes, Maya," she said gently, leaning forward. Maya hesitated, glancing nervously at the lawyers and then at the spectators behind her. Gathering her courage, she stepped forward, clutching the piece of paper as if it were her shield. Can I give you this?" she asked, her voice trembling. The courtroom fell silent. All eyes were on the girl as she approached the bench. Elizabeth extended her hand, her movements deliberate and calm, not wanting to scare the already fragile child. Maya placed the crumpled note in Elizabeth's palm and retreated quickly, her head bowed. Elizabeth unfolded the paper carefully, her heart pounding. The handwriting was shaky but legible, and the words hit her like a punch to the chest. "Please help me. I don't feel safe. My foster parents hurt me, and I have nowhere else to go." Elizabeth's breath caught in her throat. She looked up at Maya, who stood frozen in the middle of the courtroom, her wide eyes filled with both fear and hope. The judge's chest tightened as the weight of the note's plea settled on her shoulders. "Court is adjourned for a recess," Elizabeth announced, her voice steady but firm. The gavel's sharp crack echoed through the room. As people began to shuffle out, Maya's lawyer approached the bench. "Your Honor, may I ask what this is about?" Elizabeth held up a hand. "We'll reconvene after recess," she said curtly, her mind already racing. Turning to the bailiff, she added, "Please escort Maya to my chambers. I'd like to speak with her privately." Minutes later, Elizabeth sat across from Maya in her chambers, the note still in her hand. The girl looked even smaller up close, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Maya," Elizabeth said softly, "can you tell me more about this? What's been happening at your foster home?" Maya hesitated, her gaze fixed on the plush rug beneath her feet. "They don't like me," she whispered. "They say I'm a burden." Elizabeth leaned forward, her tone gentle but encouraging. "Did they hurt you?" Maya nodded slowly. "Sometimes they yell at me. Sometimes they lock me in my room if I talk too much." Elizabeth's hands tightened around the note, her jaw clenching. She fought to keep her composure, knowing she needed to remain calm for Maya's sake. Why didn't you tell anyone sooner? Maya looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Nobody listens. They always say I'm lying. Elizabeth's heart broke. She reached out, placing a reassuring hand on the girl's. I'm listening, Maya. And I promise you, I'll do everything I can to help you. After sending Maya back to wait with the court-appointed social worker, Elizabeth sat alone in her chambers, staring at the note. The words echoed in her mind, stirring a fierce determination. The foster system was supposed to protect children like Maya, yet it had failed her. Elizabeth couldn't allow this girl to return to the Bennets, or to any other home where she might be hurt again. Grabbing the phone on her desk, Elizabeth called the social services director. I want a full investigation into the Bennets household, she said, her tone brooking no argument. And I want it started immediately. The director stammered, Your Honor, that will take time. Make the time, Elizabeth interrupted. This girl doesn't have it. As she hung up, Elizabeth looked at the note once more, the weight of Maya's words heavy in her chest. This was no longer just another case on her docket. This was personal. Maya had asked for help, and Elizabeth would not let her down. For the first time in years, Elizabeth felt a fire ignite within her, a determination to fight not just for justice but for the safety and future of one little girl who had been failed too many times. And as she walked back into the courtroom to continue the hearing, Elizabeth knew one thing for certain: Maya's life was about to change forever. The courtroom was quiet as Judge Elizabeth Carter returned to her chambers after calling a recess. In her hands, she held Maya's crumpled note, the weight of its words heavy on her heart. She had seen cases of neglect and abuse before, but this felt different. The raw vulnerability in Maya's handwriting was a plea for survival, not just help. Elizabeth knew she couldn't treat this as a routine matter. Maya's life could depend on what happened next. Elizabeth's chambers were modest but comfortable, a sanctuary of calm amidst the chaos of the courtroom. Maya sat on the edge of the plush chair across from Elizabeth's desk, her small hands gripping the arms tightly. Her eyes darted nervously around the room, as though expecting someone to reprimand her for speaking out. Elizabeth placed the note on her desk and leaned forward, her tone gentle but firm. Maya, I need you to help me understand what's been happening. Can you tell me more about your foster parents? Maya hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. She avoided eye contact, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress. Elizabeth waited patiently, knowing that rushing her would only make her retreat further. Finally, Maya whispered, They don't like me. They say I talk too much. They call me annoying. Elizabeth's chest tightened. And when they say those things, what do you do? I try to be quiet, Maya said, her voice trembling. But if I forget, they get mad. Sometimes they yell, and sometimes they lock me in my room. The admission hung in the air like a heavy fog. Elizabeth took a steadying breath, her mind racing. How long have they been doing this? Maya shrugged, her shoulders slumping. Since I moved there. A few months, I think. Elizabeth leaned closer, her voice softening. Maya, why didn't you tell anyone? Maya looked up for the first time, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I tried. I told the social worker, but they said I was exaggerating. Nobody listens to me. Elizabeth clenched her jaw, anger bubbling beneath her calm exterior. She reached out, placing a reassuring hand on Maya's. I'm listening, Maya. And I promise you, this time, someone will do something. After sending Maya back to the court-appointed social worker, Elizabeth picked up her phone and called the director of social services. The woman on the other end sounded harried but professional. Director Wells, this is Judge Carter, Elizabeth began. I have serious concerns about the Bennets, Maya Brown's foster parents. I need an immediate investigation into their household. Wells sighed. Your Honor, we receive numerous complaints about foster homes. Without concrete evidence. I have Maya's testimony, Elizabeth interrupted, her tone firm. And I have a handwritten note from her describing neglect and mistreatment. I'm not asking, Director Wells. I'm ordering this investigation to begin immediately. There was a pause, then a resigned, yes, Your Honor. I'll assign someone right away. As Elizabeth hung up, her resolve hardened. Too many children were lost in the system, their voices silenced by bureaucracy and indifference. Maya wouldn't be one of them. When the hearing resumed, Elizabeth's demeanor was calm but commanding. The Bennets sat at the defense table, their polished appearances masking the tension that radiated from them. Mr. Bennet, a tall man with a sharp jawline, looked annoyed, while Mrs. Bennet sat stiffly, her hands folded primly in her lap. Elizabeth addressed them directly. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, due to concerns raised during this hearing, I have ordered an investigation into your home. Effective immediately, Maya will be placed in temporary care while these allegations are reviewed. Mrs. Bennet's face turned red, her composure cracking. Your Honor, this is absurd. We've done nothing wrong. Maya is just acting out because she misses her parents. Elizabeth's gaze was piercing. And locking her in her room is how you address that grief. Mr. Bennet shot to his feet. We're not monsters. You have no right. Elizabeth's gavel came down sharply, silencing him. I will not tolerate outbursts in my courtroom. This is not up for debate. Until the investigation is complete, Maya's safety takes precedence. The Bennets sat down, their indignation barely concealed. Elizabeth turned her attention to the social worker. Make arrangements for Maya to be transferred immediately. As the bailiff prepared to escort Maya out of the courtroom, the girl hesitated. Instead of moving toward the social worker, she turned back to Elizabeth, her wide eyes brimming with tears. Please, she said softly, her voice cracking. Don't send me back to the system. I just want to be safe. Elizabeth felt her heart ache. She knew the foster system was far from perfect, and Maya's fear of being bounced between homes was justified. But there were protocols to follow, and she couldn't bend the rules without jeopardizing the case. Maya, Elizabeth said gently, I know you're scared, but I promise you, I'll make sure you're placed somewhere safe. This is only temporary. The girl nodded reluctantly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. As she was led away, Elizabeth watched her go, vowing silently that she would keep her promise. Back in her chambers, Elizabeth sat staring at the note Maya had given her. The words were simple but carried a weight that she couldn't ignore. Please help me. They echoed in her mind, fueling her determination to uncover the full truth about the Bennets. As she began drafting orders for the investigation, Elizabeth thought about the countless children who had come through her courtroom, each with their own struggles and stories. Maya was different. There was something about her strength, her quiet determination, that struck a chord deep within Elizabeth. This wasn't just another case. This was a chance to make a real difference. And Elizabeth was ready to fight, for Maya and every child like her. What she didn't know yet was how much this case would change not only Maya's life but her own as well. The morning after the hearing, Judge Elizabeth Carter sat in her chambers, reviewing the initial findings from the investigation into the Bennets household. The reports painted a troubling picture. Despite their polished public image, whispers of neglect and mistreatment surrounded the couple. But whispers weren't enough. Elizabeth needed hard evidence if she was going to protect Maya permanently. The courtroom had often been Elizabeth's battleground, but this time, the stakes felt deeply personal. Maya's plea for help echoed in her mind, fueling her resolve. If the system had failed the girl before, Elizabeth wouldn't let it happen again. Elizabeth's order for an immediate investigation was carried out by social services, and within 24 hours, a caseworker visited the Bennets' home. The findings were unsettling. The Bennets' home, though outwardly pristine, showed subtle signs of neglect. Maya's room was sparsely furnished, with no personal touches, a stark contrast to the cheerful, lived-in spaces in the rest of the house. The pantry lacked enough food for a child, and several neighbors reported seeing Maya outside late at night, sitting alone on the steps. A report from a neighbor caught Elizabeth's attention. "I heard yelling sometimes," the neighbor had told the investigator. "And the girl would be sitting outside afterward, looking upset. She never talked about it, but you could tell something was wrong." Elizabeth felt a wave of anger. It wasn't uncommon for children in the foster system to be ignored, but Maya's silence spoke volumes about how deeply the Bennetts had failed her. At the next court hearing, the Bennetts arrived with their attorney, visibly defensive. Mr. Bennett, dressed in a crisp suit, looked irritated, while Mrs. Bennett wore an expression of practiced concern. "This is a gross misunderstanding, Your Honor," their attorney began. "The Bennetts have always provided a stable home for Maya. Any claims of neglect are exaggerated and baseless." Elizabeth's gaze didn't waver. "The investigation found multiple discrepancies in your care for Maya. Neighbors have reported yelling and instances where Maya was left alone outside. Can you explain these claims?" Mrs. Bennett's eyes darted nervously toward her husband, who answered with a rehearsed calm. "We discipline Maya as any responsible parents would. She's been struggling emotionally since her parents passed, and we've done our best to accommodate her." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "And locking her in her room? Was that part of your discipline?" Mrs. Bennett's composure cracked. We never locked her in." "That's not true." Elizabeth leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Then explain why Maya said otherwise, and why the investigation found the locks on her bedroom door installed on the outside." The Bennett's attorney quickly interjected, "Your Honor, these are circumstantial findings. The Bennetts have been foster parents for years without prior complaints. It's unfair to condemn them based on the claims of one grieving child." Elizabeth's tone was ice-cold. "Circumstantial findings or not, Maya's well-being is my priority. Until this investigation is fully resolved, she will remain in temporary care." Later that day, Elizabeth received a phone call from Sandra Harris, the social worker assigned to Maya's case. "Judge Carter," Sandra began, her voice tense, "I think we've found something that might change everything." "What is it?" Elizabeth asked, gripping the phone tighter. "We discovered financial irregularities in the Bennett's records," Sandra explained. "It seems they've been collecting stipends for fostering Maya, but a significant portion of that money is unaccounted for. There's evidence they've been using it for personal expenses, not for Maya's care." Elizabeth's anger simmered beneath the surface. "Thank you, Sandra. Forward all the documents to my office. This will be critical for the next hearing." As she hung up, Elizabeth felt a renewed sense of determination. The Bennetts weren't just neglectful, they were exploiting Maya for financial gain. This wasn't just about removing her from their care anymore. It was about holding them accountable for the harm they had caused. Elizabeth decided to meet with Maya again, hoping to gather more details about her time with the Bennetts. The girl sat in the same chair as before, clutching her stuffed animal, a small, worn bear that looked like it had been her only comfort. "Maya," Elizabeth began gently, "can you tell me more about what happened at the Bennett's house? Anything you remember might help." Maya hesitated, her small fingers fidgeting with the bear's ear. "They didn't like it when I asked about my mom and dad," she said quietly. "They said I shouldn't talk about them anymore. That I had to forget them." Elizabeth's heart sank. "Why do you think they said that?" Maya shrugged, her voice trembling. "They didn't want me to ask questions. They said it made me difficult." Elizabeth leaned closer, her tone encouraging. "You're not difficult, Maya. You're brave. And it's okay to talk about your parents. They'd want you to remember them." For the first time, Maya's expression softened. "Do you think my mom and dad would be proud of me?" Elizabeth smiled warmly. "I know they would be. And I'm proud of you too." As the day ended, Elizabeth sat at her desk, surrounded by files and reports. The picture was becoming clearer. The Bennetts had taken Maya in for the money, not out of love or care. They had failed her in every way that mattered, and now they were trying to cover their tracks. Elizabeth knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The Bennets would fight to protect their image, and the system was often slow to respond to the needs of children like Maya. But Elizabeth was determined to see this through. Looking at Maya's note one more time, Elizabeth felt a surge of resolve. Maya had trusted her with her truth, and Elizabeth wouldn't let her down. This wasn't just about justice, it was about giving Maya the life she deserved. And as Elizabeth prepared for the next phase of the case, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to uncover, a deeper truth that would change everything. Judge Elizabeth Carter sat in her chambers, poring over the case files late into the evening. The investigation into the Bennets had uncovered financial irregularities, signs of neglect, and mounting evidence that they had no genuine interest in Maya's well-being. But there was something else nagging at Elizabeth, a feeling she couldn't shake. Something about this case felt strangely personal. Elizabeth decided to revisit Maya's file, hoping to find answers. She flipped through the pages detailing Maya's time in foster care, her parents' tragic deaths in a car accident 2 years earlier, and the series of homes she had been shuffled through. Each new foster placement seemed colder and more indifferent than the last, until she was finally placed with the Bennets. As Elizabeth reached the section about Maya's biological family, a name jumped out at her: Angela Brown. The name sent a jolt through her. Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes as memories surfaced. Angela Brown. It couldn't be a coincidence. Years ago, when Elizabeth had still been a defense attorney, she had represented a young woman named Angela Brown. Angela had been fighting to keep custody of her daughter after her husband's sudden death. Elizabeth had admired Angela's determination and her fierce love for her child. They had won the case, and Angela had kept her daughter. That daughter had to be Maya. Elizabeth's heart ached as she realized the connection. She remembered Angela's laughter, her resilience, and the way she had spoken about her daughter with such pride. To think that Angela's little girl was now sitting in her courtroom, pleading for safety, was almost too much to bear. The next day, Elizabeth requested to meet with Maya privately again. The girl sat in the same chair, her small frame dwarfed by the plush cushions. She clutched her stuffed bear tightly, her wary eyes fixed on the judge. "Maya," Elizabeth began, her voice soft but steady, "I want to ask you something about your mom. Do you remember her?" Maya's expression shifted, her eyes lighting up with a mix of sadness and warmth. "A little," she said. "She used to sing to me at night. And she always said I was her sunshine." Elizabeth smiled, her throat tightening. "She loved you very much." Maya nodded, her grip on the bear tightening. "I miss her." Elizabeth reached across the desk, placing a reassuring hand on the girl's. "I knew your mom, Maya. A long time ago. She was one of the bravest people I've ever met." Maya's eyes widened. "You knew her?" Elizabeth nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "I helped her once when she was trying to keep you safe. She fought so hard for you. She would be so proud of the person you're becoming." For a moment, the walls Maya had built around herself seemed to crumble. She leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you think she'd be mad at me? For being scared?" Elizabeth's heart broke. "Oh, Maya, no. She'd be proud of you for speaking up, for being brave enough to ask for help. That's what she would want." Later that evening, Elizabeth felt compelled to dig deeper into Angela's life. She requested the police reports and personal effects collected after the car accident that had claimed Angela's life. Most of it was routine, photos of the crash site, medical records, but one item stood out, a sealed envelope addressed simply to the judge. Elizabeth's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from Angela, dated just days before her death. "Dear Judge Carter. If you're reading this, something terrible has happened. I've been receiving threats from someone connected to my husband's former business partner. They want me to sell the house and give up custody of Maya, but I can't. She's my world, and I won't let them take her from me. If anything happens to me, please make sure Maya is safe. Please fight for her the way you fought for me. With gratitude and hope. Angela Brown. Elizabeth's breath caught in her throat. The letter revealed that Angela had been living in fear, aware that she was being targeted. And now, 2 years later, her daughter was still fighting for safety. Armed with the letter, Elizabeth began piecing together the bigger picture. Angela's husband had left behind a modest inheritance that was meant for Maya, but Angela's refusal to sell their home or relinquish custody had made her a target. Now, it seemed likely that the Bennets had been placed in Maya's life by someone who wanted to exploit that inheritance. The realization filled Elizabeth with a fierce determination. This wasn't just about removing Maya from a neglectful home, it was about uncovering the truth behind her mother's death and protecting her from a system that had failed her repeatedly. The next morning, Elizabeth called an emergency meeting with Sandra Harris, the social worker assigned to Maya's case, and the investigator handling the Bennets' financial records. She shared the letter and her growing suspicions. "This isn't just neglect," Elizabeth said, her voice firm. "This is a deliberate attempt to exploit Maya. And it may be connected to her mother's death." Sandra frowned. "Do you think the Bennets are directly involved?" Elizabeth nodded. "It's possible. Their financial records show clear signs of fraud. We need to dig deeper, into their connections, their motives, and who else might be pulling the strings." As the team began strategizing, Elizabeth couldn't shake the image of Angela's determined face and Maya's tearful eyes. The fight for Maya's safety had just become more complicated, but Elizabeth was ready for the challenge. She owed it to Angela, and she owed it to Maya. Later that day, Elizabeth met with Maya again, this time sharing part of the letter. "Your mom wanted me to protect you," Elizabeth said softly. "She trusted me to keep you safe." Maya looked up, her eyes brimming with hope. "Do you think she'd be okay with me staying with you? Even for a little while?" Elizabeth's heart swelled. "I think she'd want you to be somewhere you feel safe. And if that's with me, I'd be honored." For the first time, Maya smiled, a small, hesitant smile, but a smile nonetheless. And in that moment, Elizabeth knew she wouldn't stop until Maya's world was as safe and full of love as Angela had dreamed it could be. Judge Elizabeth Carter felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her as she stared at Angela Brown's heartfelt letter. It wasn't just a plea for Maya's safety, it was a call to action. The knowledge that Angela had entrusted her daughter's well-being to Elizabeth made every decision more personal. Maya wasn't just another child lost in the system, she was a symbol of a promise Elizabeth intended to keep. Elizabeth called an emergency meeting with the district attorney, Sandra Harris, and the lead investigator on Maya's case. They gathered in her chambers, the walls lined with case files and notes. Angela's letter sat in the center of the desk, a stark reminder of the stakes. "We've uncovered enough evidence to show neglect and financial exploitation," Sandra began. "The Bennets were siphoning funds meant for Maya's care, and the fraudulent transactions are damning. But if we want to prove deeper involvement, we need more." Elizabeth leaned forward, her voice steady but intense. "The letter suggests that Angela was being threatened before her death. The timing of her accident is too coincidental. Someone wanted her out of the way to gain control of Maya's inheritance." The investigator nodded. "We've traced the fraudulent activity to an account tied to a real estate developer named Victor Gaines. He was a business associate of Angela's late husband, and he's known for using underhanded tactics to acquire properties." "Gaines," Elizabeth murmured. The name was familiar. He had appeared in court before, always skating just beyond the reach of the law. "Do we have evidence linking him to the Bennets?" "Not yet," the investigator admitted. "But the Bennets received payments from a shell company that Gaines controls. It's enough to raise questions." Elizabeth's gaze hardened. "Then we dig deeper. Issue subpoenas, follow the money, and question anyone who's ever worked with him. This isn't just about fraud, it's about justice for Angela and Maya. As the investigation unfolded, Elizabeth grew increasingly concerned about Maya's safety. The Bennets had already proven themselves willing to exploit the girl, and if Gaines was involved, the danger was even greater. Elizabeth called Sandra to her chambers. "I want Maya placed in protective custody immediately," she said firmly. "Until we have solid evidence against Gaines and the Bennets, she's at risk." Sandra hesitated. "Your Honor, protective custody could be traumatic for her. She's already been through so much." Elizabeth sighed, her resolve softening slightly. "You're right. Let's explore alternatives. She can stay with me for now." Sandra's eyes widened. "Are you sure? That's a big step." "I'm sure," Elizabeth said without hesitation. "Maya needs stability, and I want her to know she's not alone in this." That evening, Elizabeth brought Maya home to her modest but welcoming house. The girl clutched her stuffed bear tightly as she stepped inside, her wide eyes scanning the cozy living room. Elizabeth knelt beside her, offering a warm smile. "This is your home for as long as you need it," Elizabeth said gently. "You're safe here." Maya hesitated before nodding. "Thank you," she whispered. Elizabeth showed her to a guest room decorated with soft pastel colors and a small desk by the window. Maya placed her bear on the bed and turned to Elizabeth. "Do you think my mom would like it here?" Elizabeth's throat tightened, but she smiled. "I think she'd love it. And I think she'd be happy knowing you're somewhere safe." Over the next few days, Maya began to open up. She shared stories about her mother, how Angela used to sing her lullabies, how she always made Maya pancakes on Sundays, and how she promised they would always stay together. "She said I was her sunshine," Maya said one evening as they sat at the kitchen table. "But then she was gone." Elizabeth reached across the table, taking Maya's hand. "She's still with you, Maya. In your heart and in the love you carry for her. And she'd be so proud of you for being so brave." Tears welled in Maya's eyes, but she managed a small smile. "I hope so." Late one night, Elizabeth received a call from the investigator. "We found something," he said, his voice urgent. Emails between Gaines and the Bennets discussing Maya's trust fund. Gaines was pressuring them to ensure the money could be transferred to his control once Maya turned 18. Elizabeth felt a surge of anger. This ties him directly to the exploitation. "It gets worse," the investigator continued. "We also uncovered evidence suggesting that Gaines ordered the tampering of Angela's car. It wasn't an accident, Your Honor. It was murder." Elizabeth's breath caught. Angela had been right, she had been targeted for refusing to give up custody of Maya. The betrayal was staggering, but it also solidified Elizabeth's determination to bring everyone involved to justice. The next morning, Elizabeth met with Sandra and the district attorney. They prepared arrest warrants for Gaines and the Bennets, building a case that would expose the web of deceit and corruption. "This won't be easy," Sandra warned. "Gaines has powerful connections." Elizabeth's gaze was steely. "Then we'll make sure the evidence is undeniable. They can't escape this." That evening, Elizabeth sat with Maya in the living room. The girl was working on a drawing, her small hands carefully shading the edges of a sunflower. "Maya," Elizabeth began, "I want you to know that we've made progress. The people who hurt your mom and tried to hurt you, they're going to face justice." Maya looked up, her expression a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Do you think they'll go to jail?" Elizabeth nodded. "Yes, I do. And I promise I'll do everything I can to make sure you're safe." For the first time, Maya's smile reached her eyes. "Thank you, Judge Carter." "Call me Elizabeth," she said softly. "Or, anything else you'd like." Maya hesitated before whispering, "Can I call you Aunt Liz?" Elizabeth's heart swelled. "I'd like that very much." As Maya settled into her new routine, Elizabeth worked tirelessly to prepare for the trial. The evidence against Gaines and the Bennetts was mounting, but the fight was far from over. Still, Elizabeth felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a judge anymore, she was an advocate, a protector, and perhaps, someday, the family Maya desperately needed. And as she tucked Maya into bed that night, Elizabeth made a silent vow: no matter what it took, she would keep her promise to Angela and ensure that Maya's future was bright, safe, and filled with love. The mounting evidence against Victor Gaines and the Bennetts painted a chilling picture, but Judge Elizabeth Carter sensed there was still more to uncover. The discovery of emails linking Gaines to the exploitation of Maya's trust fund and the tampering of Angela's car had escalated the case from neglect to something far darker. The stakes were higher than ever, and Elizabeth was determined to ensure that justice was served. The day began with a meeting between Elizabeth, Sandra Harris, and the lead investigator, Detective Alan Price. The room was tense, the weight of the case pressing down on everyone present. Detective Price laid out the latest findings. "We've confirmed that Gaines orchestrated a scheme to control Maya's trust fund. The Bennetts were complicit, acting as middlemen to ensure the money would funnel into Gaines's accounts once Maya turned 18. Elizabeth leaned forward, her gaze intense. "What about the car accident? Do we have enough to prove it was deliberate?" Price nodded grimly. "We've uncovered a payment from one of Gaines's shell companies to a known mechanic with a history of criminal activity. The payment was made 2 days before Angela's accident, and records show the mechanic was seen near Angela's car the day before the crash." Elizabeth's jaw tightened. This confirms Angela's fears. She knew she was being targeted. Sandra interjected, her voice steady. "This isn't just fraud or neglect anymore. This is murder." Elizabeth's tone was resolute. "Then we charge Gaines and the Bennetts with everything we've got. But we need to ensure Maya stays protected until the trial is over. They've shown they're willing to go to any lengths to get what they want." That evening, as Elizabeth returned home, a dark SUV idled at the end of her street. She recognized the make and model immediately. It matched the description of the vehicles used by Gaines's associates. Her heart raced as she parked her car in the driveway, her hand instinctively resting on her phone. She stepped out cautiously, keeping her eyes on the SUV. A figure inside shifted, and then the vehicle roared to life, speeding away into the night. Elizabeth stood frozen for a moment before dialing Detective Price. "They're watching," she said, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling beneath the surface. "Gaines's people were outside my house." "We'll increase surveillance," Price assured her. "But you need to be careful, Judge Carter. They're desperate, and desperate people are dangerous." Elizabeth hung up, her resolve hardening. If Gaines thought intimidation would make her back down, he was mistaken. She walked inside, locking the door behind her, and checked on Maya, who was drawing quietly in the living room. "Everything okay, Aunt Liz?" Maya asked, looking up with wide eyes. Elizabeth forced a smile. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Let's finish your drawing." The next morning, while sorting through Angela's personal effects, Elizabeth came across an old notebook. It was worn and faded, the pages filled with Angela's handwriting. Flipping through it, Elizabeth found detailed notes about Angela's suspicions regarding Gaines. One entry stood out: "They've been pressuring me to sell the house and give up Maya's trust. I won't do it. They think I don't have proof, but I do. I've hidden it where only Maya would know to look." Elizabeth's pulse quickened. She called Maya into the room. "Maya, do you remember your mom hiding anything important? Maybe something she said was meant just for you?" Maya furrowed her brow, thinking hard. "She used to tell me that if I ever needed help, should check the sunflower. I didn't know what she meant." Elizabeth's breath caught. Sunflower? Did she have a sunflower painting, or maybe a piece of jewelry? Maya's eyes lit up. She had a little sunflower box. It was on her desk in our old house. Elizabeth's heart sank. Angela's house had been sold after her death, but the contents had been placed in storage. She called Sandra immediately. "We need access to Angela's storage unit. There's something there that might break this case wide open." That afternoon, Elizabeth and Sandra arrived at the storage facility, accompanied by Detective Price. The unit was cramped and dusty, filled with boxes and furniture that had once been part of Angela and Maya's life. Maya clutched Elizabeth's hand as they sifted through the belongings. After nearly an hour of searching, Maya suddenly exclaimed, "There it is." She pointed to a small wooden box painted with a sunflower. Elizabeth opened it carefully, revealing a USB drive and a folded letter. The letter was addressed to "My Sunshine," and Elizabeth handed it to Maya, letting her read it privately. The USB drive contained encrypted files, which Detective Price promised to analyze immediately. As they left the storage unit, Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that they had just found the key to dismantling Gaines's operation. Later that evening, Detective Price called Elizabeth with an update. "Judge Carter, the USB drive contains detailed financial records, emails, and contracts, all linking Gaines to the exploitation of Maya's trust and Angela's death. It's airtight." Elizabeth exhaled, relief washing over her. "This is enough to take him down." "It's more than enough," Price confirmed. "We're issuing warrants tonight." That night, Elizabeth sat with Maya as the girl reread her mother's letter. Tears streamed down Maya's face, but her expression was calm. "She called me her sunshine," Maya whispered. "She said she loved me more than anything." Elizabeth pulled Maya into a gentle hug. "She did, Maya. And she fought for you every step of the way. Now it's my turn to fight for you." Maya looked up at Elizabeth, her eyes filled with trust. "Do you think she'd be okay with me staying with you? For good?" Elizabeth's voice caught, but she smiled. "I think she'd want you to be somewhere you feel safe and loved. And if that's with me, I'd be honored." With the evidence secured and warrants issued, the case against Gaines and the Bennetts was stronger than ever. But Elizabeth knew the fight wasn't over. The trial would be grueling, and Gaines's lawyers would do everything in their power to discredit the evidence. As Elizabeth tucked Maya into bed that night, she made a silent vow. She would honor Angela's memory and protect Maya at all costs. The storm was far from over, but for the first time, Elizabeth felt that justice was within reach. Together, she and Maya would face whatever came next, and they would do it as a team. The evidence against Victor Gaines and the Bennetts had been collected, and the warrants were executed. Gaines and the Bennetts were arrested in a coordinated operation that sent shockwaves through the community. The once respected Bennetts, who had cultivated an image of care and altruism, were exposed as fraudsters who exploited vulnerable children. Meanwhile, Gaines, a powerful businessman who had operated with impunity for years, was finally facing accountability. Judge Elizabeth Carter stood at the forefront of the fight for justice, but she knew the trial ahead would be anything but easy. The trial began in a packed courtroom. The prosecution, led by a sharp and determined district attorney, laid out the charges: child neglect, fraud, conspiracy, and, most damningly, murder. The defense team, paid handsomely by Gaines's considerable wealth, worked tirelessly to discredit the evidence and shift the narrative. Maya, still staying with Elizabeth, was shielded from the proceedings. Elizabeth had decided that exposing her to the courtroom's harsh environment would only reopen old wounds. Instead, Sandra Harris, the social worker, stayed with her, ensuring she felt safe and supported. Elizabeth attended the trial as a silent observer, her presence in the gallery a reminder of her commitment to the case. She listened intently as the prosecution outlined the timeline of events: Gaines's relentless pursuit of Maya's trust fund, the Bennetts' role in facilitating the fraud, and the tampering of Angela Brown's car that led to her death. Detective Alan Price took the stand to present the contents of the USB drive discovered in Angela's sunflower box. The encrypted files contained damning evidence: financial transactions linking Gaines's shell companies to the Bennetts, email exchanges discussing controlling the trust, and even a payment order to the mechanic who had sabotaged Angela's car. These records show a clear pattern of manipulation and exploitation, Price testified. Gaines used his network of shell companies and intermediaries to exploit vulnerable families, with the Bennetts acting as willing accomplices. The courtroom was silent as the prosecution played a recording of a phone call between Gaines and Mr. Bennett. In the recording, Gaines's voice was cold and calculating. "Make sure the girl doesn't cause problems," he said. "We can't afford any loose ends." Elizabeth felt a chill run down her spine. Gaines's complete lack of empathy was chilling, and she was grateful that Maya was far from the courtroom. The defense team, however, was ruthless. They argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that the USB drive could have been tampered with. They portrayed the Bennetts as overwhelmed foster parents who had made mistakes but weren't malicious. As for Gaines, they painted him as a victim of overzealous investigators who were using him as a scapegoat. The turning point came when the defense tried to shift blame onto Angela herself, suggesting that she had been unstable and prone to reckless decisions. Elizabeth clenched her fists, anger simmering beneath her composed exterior. She knew Angela's love for Maya had been unwavering, and hearing her character maligned was almost too much to bear. In a bold move, the prosecution called Maya to testify. Elizabeth had mixed feelings about this decision. She worried about the emotional toll it would take on the girl but also understood the importance of her voice in the trial. Maya entered the courtroom nervously, clutching her stuffed bear. Elizabeth offered her a reassuring smile from the gallery. The prosecutor knelt to her level before beginning, speaking gently. "Maya, can you tell us about your time with the Bennetts?" the prosecutor asked. Maya hesitated, her small voice barely audible. They didn't like me," she said. "They said I talked too much. And, sometimes they locked me in my room." Her words hung heavy in the courtroom. The defense attempted to cross-examine her, but Maya's quiet bravery and consistent answers made her testimony unshakable. She described the fear she felt and how her mother had always told her to be strong. As the trial neared its conclusion, the prosecution introduced an unexpected witness, a former employee of Gaines who had turned whistleblower. The man, visibly nervous, detailed the inner workings of Gaines's operations. "He didn't care who got hurt," the whistleblower said. "It was all about the money. When Angela refused to sell her house and give up the trust, Gaines decided she was a problem that needed to be dealt with." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. This testimony solidified the connection between Gaines and Angela's death, leaving the defense scrambling to counter the damning claims. After weeks of emotional testimony, forensic evidence, and powerful arguments, the jury deliberated for hours. When they returned, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The foreman stood, clearing his throat. "On the charge of child neglect, we find the Bennetts guilty. On the charges of fraud, conspiracy, and murder, we find Victor Gaines guilty." Elizabeth exhaled deeply, a wave of relief washing over her. Justice had been served. That evening, Elizabeth returned home to Maya. The girl looked up expectantly as Elizabeth entered the living room. "Is it over?" Maya asked. Elizabeth knelt beside her, pulling her into a gentle hug. "It's over, sweetheart. They can't hurt you anymore." Maya's small arms wrapped around Elizabeth's neck. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Elizabeth smiled, her heart swelling with both pride and love. "You don't have to thank me, Maya. You're my sunshine now." Though the trial had ended, Elizabeth knew the journey of healing was just beginning for both of them. Maya had lost so much, but she had also gained something new, a family. And Elizabeth, who had spent years dedicated to justice, had found a deeper purpose, ensuring Maya's life was filled with safety, love, and hope for the future. Together, they would move forward, stronger than ever. With the trial behind them and justice served, Judge Elizabeth Carter and Maya were finally free to focus on building a life unburdened by fear. The courtroom battles had been exhausting, the revelations harrowing, but as Elizabeth watched Maya smile for the first time in what felt like forever, she knew the fight had been worth it. Still, the journey wasn't over. Healing was a process, and for Maya, learning to trust the world again would take time. The first few weeks after the trial were quiet but transformative. Maya was still adjusting to the idea of stability. For so long, she had lived with the uncertainty of whether she'd have a home or someone who truly cared for her. Now, with Elizabeth's reassurance, she began to believe in the possibility of happiness. Elizabeth transformed the guest room into a space just for Maya. Together, they painted the walls a soft lavender, Maya's favorite color, and filled the room with things that made her feel safe and loved: books, art supplies, and her mother's sunflower box. A framed photo of Angela took pride of place on the nightstand, a reminder of the woman whose strength and love had brought them together. One evening, as they unpacked the last of Maya's belongings, the girl turned to Elizabeth. "Do you think my mom would be okay with this? With me staying here with you?" Elizabeth knelt beside her, looking her in the eye. "Maya, I think your mom would be so proud of you. She'd be happy knowing you're with someone who loves you and will always keep you safe." Maya hesitated before asking, "Do you love me?" Elizabeth felt tears prick her eyes. She reached out, pulling Maya into a gentle hug. "Of course I do, sweetheart. You're my family now." In the months that followed, Maya began to blossom. She joined an art class at a local community center, where she quickly became the star pupil. Her paintings often featured sunflowers, a tribute to her mother, and vibrant, hopeful scenes that reflected her newfound sense of safety. Elizabeth attended every class exhibition, beaming with pride as Maya shyly showed off her work. One of the paintings, a striking portrait of a mother and daughter holding hands in a field of sunflowers, was so moving that it brought several viewers to tears. "That's you and your mom, isn't it?" Elizabeth asked after the show. Maya nodded, her cheeks pink with pride. "And you too," she added softly. "You're part of it now." Though their bond had grown unshakable, Elizabeth wanted to make it official. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, she broached the subject. "Maya," Elizabeth began, her tone warm but serious, "how would you feel about me adopting you? Making it official that we're family?" Maya's eyes widened, and for a moment, she was silent. Then, tears welled up as she nodded enthusiastically. "You mean, you'd be my mom?" Elizabeth smiled, her heart full. "If you want me to be, yes." Maya threw her arms around Elizabeth, her voice breaking as she said, "I'd like that. I'd like that a lot." The adoption process moved quickly, thanks to Elizabeth's connections in the legal system. On the day of the hearing, Maya stood proudly beside Elizabeth as the judge, an old friend and colleague of Elizabeth's, finalized the paperwork. "Congratulations," the judge said warmly. "You're officially a family." The courtroom erupted in applause, and Elizabeth bent down to hug Maya. "You're stuck with me now," she teased gently. Maya grinned, wiping happy tears from her cheeks. "I wouldn't want it any other way." As part of their healing journey, Elizabeth and Maya visited Angela's grave together. Maya placed a bouquet of sunflowers at the headstone and knelt beside it, her small hands resting on the cool stone. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. "I just wanted to tell you that I'm okay. Judge Carter, no, Aunt Liz, is taking really good care of me. I miss you so much, but I promise I'll be okay." Elizabeth stood back, giving Maya the space she needed. When Maya rose, she took Elizabeth's hand and smiled. "Thank you," she said simply. Elizabeth squeezed her hand. "You don't have to thank me, Maya. It's what your mom would have wanted." As they drove home, Maya leaned her head against the window, watching the sun set over the horizon. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. She had lost so much, but she had also gained something beautiful: a new family, a new home, and a future filled with love and possibilities. Elizabeth glanced at Maya in the rearview mirror, her heart swelling with pride. She had spent her career fighting for justice, but this, giving Maya a life where she could thrive, was her greatest accomplishment. Over time, Elizabeth and Maya found a rhythm to their life together. They celebrated birthdays with big cakes and balloons, spent quiet Sundays painting in the backyard, and shared laughter over silly movies. Maya even started calling Elizabeth Mom, a title that filled Elizabeth with a deep sense of fulfillment. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the yard, Maya turned to Elizabeth. "Do you think my mom is happy now?" Elizabeth wrapped an arm around Maya, pulling her close. "I think she's smiling down at you every single day. And I think she's so proud of the amazing, brave person you're becoming." Maya smiled, resting her head on Elizabeth's shoulder. "I think so too." Together, they sat in the golden glow of the evening, knowing that their pasts, though filled with pain, had brought them to this moment, a life where love, hope, and family prevailed. This story reminds us of the incredible resilience of the human spirit and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Maya's journey from fear and uncertainty to finding a safe, loving home shows that, with courage and support, it's possible to overcome even the most daunting challenges. Elizabeth's determination to honor a promise and protect Maya serves as a powerful reminder that doing the right thing can change lives. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. We'd love for you to join our community and continue sharing these incredible stories together.